Good morning and welcome to the Commissioners meeting. This is the first of the year. We appreciate everybody coming in on this blustery day. If you will, I'd like to have a moment of silent prayer and then we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Public comments. If there's no public comments, then we'll go to recognitions.
Well, just all of our first responders and emergency personnel that have been responding already to trees down and car wrecks. So just want to thank them for what they do and that they'll be safe today.
Mr. Jeffrey? Mr. Powell? All right. We need approval of the agenda, please.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to amend the agenda to include the ethics policy.
Okay, would you like to put that, the first thing under action items?
Yes, that would be fine.
All right. Is there anything else? Are we gonna take the closed session off?
Yes, we need to take a closed session.
So we're going to drop the closed session, if that's all right with everyone. I had a motion to approve, need a second.
Second.
All those in favor, we'll do roll call voting. Mr. Hall, Mr. Jeffers, Mr. Owen, Mr. Ostraker. Is Bill Carter on?
No.
Mr. Carter,
No, he's not on.
how about Mr. Dickerson?
No, sir.
Okay, and then myself, yes. Motion carries. Approval of the consent agenda, December the 6th, 2021, regular meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor, we will do roll call voting. Mr. Hall? Mr. Jeffers? Mr. Owen? Mr. Ostraker? And myself, aye. Mr. Dickerson, we just voted on the consent agenda. Aye. All right, thank you. Motion carries. Presentation, I'm guessing that they're not here, right?
Miss Alexis from VIDA is on.
What did she say?
He's on Zoom.
Okay.
He's on.
Yes, ma'am.
Good morning. I am Alexis Franks. I am the Southeast Director for Workforce and Career Services with Telemount Corporation. We are submitting our 2022 program year application for Project Pride for our community service block grant application. I provided the application for review. We are proposing to serve 20 Caswell families next program year. We currently serve Rockingham, Caswell, and Person counties. This year, we are slated to serve 11 families, so that application has been provided.
Thank you. Any questions? I don't guess so. Thank you. I'm sorry, Mr. Hall has one.
Hey, I have one. Give us a summary of the services that you provide?
Absolutely. So we currently provide educational supports and emergency assistance to families. This funding is provided through the Office of Economic Opportunity for North Carolina. So our services mainly are around educational supports and providing low-income families with paid classroom training, with paid work experience training or internship program, and also housing assistance, nutrition assistance, and childcare assistance. So these services are available based on poverty levels. There is a short application that can be done with any of our career coaches. And then we help to provide information on income or high in demand occupations and what is in the area. So we look at each individual's needs specifically and customize a plan for them. The funding is very similar to WIOA, if you're familiar with that funding as well. But we are definitely there to support what a family might need and provide wraparound services and supports as well.
Thank you.
Thank
Mr. Chairman, may I?
you. Yes.
Ms. Franks, just a quick question. Are you with Telamon or are you with VIA?
I am with Telamon.
Telamon, okay. I just wanted to make sure.
All right, thank you.
Any more questions? Thank you, ma'am. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Moving on to discussion items. The planning board discussion was postponed due to the following. The joint meeting between the Board of Commissioners and the Planning Board, Watershed Review Board will be postponed until after the conclusion of the Watershed Review Board's current appeals. Under that, there are three things listing. Number one, litigation in Caswell County Superior Court between Sunrock and some of the appellants in the Watershed Board matter. Number two, members of the Watershed Board are obligated to be independent in their decision-making and to make their decision based only on the record generated at the hearing. And number three, potential discussion could create a due process issue with any decision the Watershed Review Board might make. I'm assuming that everyone got a copy of the letter that the attorney sent me. We had Brian email them out. So I hope you got those. If there's any questions, if you would like, we can direct them to the county attorney or the county manager. Hearing none, we'll move on. Commissioner work session topics.
Commissioners, I've received one email with topics the board will discuss during the upcoming work session on the 28th. If there are items the board wants to discuss or you as individual members of the board want to discuss, we need those items as soon as possible so we as staff can prepare the discussion for those items. So if you have items you want to discuss, please get those to either me or Carla as soon as possible so we can start preparing.
Thank you. You say you have one?
Yes, Commissioner Osterreicher has emailed us his list, but that's the only list we have at this point. And if you want to tell us what topics you'd like to discuss here and now, you know, we're happy to record those and take those down if you know them. Or you can send an email or call us later on in the week.
Does anyone have your topic, Mr. Miller, at this point? Let's not. We'll move on to action items, ethics approval. Mr. Cobb, Chairman, Commissioner Howell.
Mr. Chairman, I ask that this be added because it was on our November 1 agenda, and we had not acted, and it hadn't come up again. So I think it's time that, we approve this ethics policy so we can move on.
Any questions from board members?
Yes, I have a couple of questions. I thought we were gonna put this off until after we heard from the planning board during the joint session, where we could talk to them and understand what their views were. Because a lot of this was generated during the back and forth over the zoning going on in the county, and this was interjected into it. And I also understand that the State Board of Ethics already oversees the ethics of the Board of Commissioners as well as their subboards. So if they are already in a place where you can make a complaint to them if you have a problem with the ethics, why do we want to enact something that is, what, 4 pages long? 3 pages long? I have a fear that if we put too many restrictions on the boards that we appoint people to, that we will not get an independent view of their actions. In other words, they will be stifled because they'll be afraid to tell us what they really think for fear of being kicked off a board. If you want independent thinking and you want an advisory board to function like it should, they need to be able to express their opinions to us and take independent actions as board members with no fear of being micromanaged.
Any more comments?
I'll talk at. The commissioners are covered by a code of ethics that come down from the state. Employees are covered by a code of ethics that the county manager put out and we approved. The other boards and commissions should be included in a code of ethics. Delaying the code of ethics to talk to any particular board to me is not relevant. Code of ethics is about what we should and should not do. It's not about what any particular board would give their opinion on. It's kind of hard to explain, but your code of ethics is like your personal code. Do you normally lie to other people? The code of ethics says that that shouldn't happen. We don't need to talk to the board about that. We want to put that in the policy that we not expect you to lie to the board or to any other body. The code of ethics does not require a vote from any board other than the Board of Commissioners. So we really don't need to hear their opinion of any other board. We don't get the opinions of other boards about decisions we make today or any other day. The code of ethics is our general rules of expectations. We expect you to carry yourself in a certain manner. And that's what it's all about. We've got it for the commissioners, we've got it for employees. We need to go ahead and cover it for boards and commissions.
And I would agree with that as well. I think this is a policy dealing with very specific things concerning our behavior as commissioners, but concerning the behavior of anybody that in any way represents Castle County government. So I just think to include all that will be involved in Castle County government is the right way to go. doesn't impede free speech. But when they are on the board for Caldwell County, there are certain things that we cannot, or they cannot do. So I don't have a problem with it.
Mr. Ostrowski.
Yeah, I agree with the aforementioned statements. I think it's important that we clearly delineate the fact that there can be no conflict of interest. There could be no, as we say here, misuse of their position. These are common sense rules of ethics. They don't inhibit anything other than bad behavior, unacceptable behavior. And therefore, it's not a reduction of free speech, it's a reduction of inappropriate speech, or in many cases, illegal speech. So I have no issues with this code of ethics whatsoever.
I have a big issue with it, and I think the unsung theme in the room today is retaliation against certain board members for not following the status quo of where this Board of Commissioners, well, certain members of this Board of Commissioners wanted people that were appointed to boards to act in a certain manner, and when they didn't, now all of a sudden we've got a set of rules sprung into play. This is going to do nothing but micromanage. It's going to stifle people's will to tell us what we need. And my gosh, people, we are appointing some of these folks to advisory boards. We want these people to feel like they can tell us what's in their mind and their ideas on the issues without being afraid that there will be repercussions. We already have a state board that you can complain to that covers the ethics, whether it's a commissioner, whether it's somebody on one of these boards we're talking about. There is a mechanism in place if they're doing truly unethical conduct. We all want ethical conduct on our boards, but we want independent thinking. And I, for one, cannot go along with a set of rules that's set in motion just to stifle that.
Any more questions or comments?
We need a motion to adopt.
Yep.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt the ethics code. I'll do roll call voting. Mr. Dickerson?
No.
Mr. Howell? Aye. Mr. Jeffries? Aye. Mr. Owen?
Aye.
Mr. Ostrowski?
Aye.
And I'll vote aye. Motion carries. The ethics code will be in effect. Approval of rules and procedures. Do we have any discussion on the approval of rules and procedures?
Mr. Chairman, just a comment. I asked at the last meeting that this be delayed until this meeting, and I just couldn't remember, and even over the holidays, what came to my attention this past summer that we need to discuss about the rules and procedures. So I move that the rules and procedures be approved.
You make a motion to approve.
Yeah.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All those in favor by roll call voting, Mr. Dixon?
Aye.
Mr. Howell?
Aye.
Mr. Jeffries? Mr. Owen?
Aye.
Mr. Ostrowski? Aye. And aye. Motion carries. Financial services contract, Mr. Miller?
Commissioners, as many of you know, audit firms are no longer able to prepare the year-end financial statements for the county. This is a best practice when audit firms are engaged, because if auditors are allowed to both prepare the financial statements and conduct the audit on those financial documents, it would be as though that the auditors were auditing their own work, which is not a best practice in the financial services industry. This fact, coupled with the growing number of public records requests and the conversion from our legacy accounting ACS software to the new accounting software Munis, has led us to seek additional financial services assistance. What we are finding is multiple conversion issues that date back many years with our legacy system. So in conclusion, this agreement will allow us to complete the conversion from ACS to Munis. It will comply with the new requirements that auditors not prepare financial statements and conduct the audits. And this is probably the most importantly, it'll assure that when we provide the Board of Commissioners with financial information, it's both accurate and timely. So we do believe we will be able to do this within the current budget. We do not believe that you'll have to make an additional dollars available to us for this. So no new appropriations. So at this time, we want to ask that you approve this contract or agreement with CPA.
Mr. Chairman, as you begin discussing this item, just know that I reviewed the standard contract letter of agreement. It's fairly standard. There are some county-specific terms that we'll have to add, our general pre-audit and some other language in there that we see, around divestments and things like that we see in all of our contracts. So if you will, if you're considering approve it, if you'll just do it subject to final county attorney approval, and I'll make sure those standard terms are inserted in the final agreement.
Any more discussion?
Yeah, I've got a few questions. This is in relationship to trying to work out the bugs to get the new software system, Munis, implemented properly in the county.
Yes, that's part of it. That's a big part of it. You're correct.
Where are the representatives for the Munis company in all this? We purchased the software from them. Are they not supplying any technical support to help?
They are. And I guess the best way I can describe this is their job is to complete the conversion with the data that we have. If the data that we have is in an unusable format, it doesn't transfer correctly. So with the data not transferring correctly, that's where we're finding our problems.
I've asked a bunch of questions behind the scenes. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, Mr. Miller. I'm just trying to understand why we're going through this process and approving this money. At what level do you anticipate the expenditure to cap out? How much money are we talking about spending?
Honestly, I can't tell you that. I wish I could. I know this is an agreement not to exceed $30,000. If at the end of this agreement, we don't think we've reached the point where we can proceed on our own, I'll have to come back before this board and ask for additional money or ask for an additional service contract to be approved. And specifically, it was set up like that so the board could be aware of how much money we were spending going through this process. I hope we get it ironed out within the first $30,000. I sincerely hope that, but I can't guarantee you that.
So we have a financial director. We have a retired financial director that's helping with this process.
Say that one more time.
So we have a financial director working on this, and the retired financial director has came back and she's working part-time to help try to straighten all this out as well.
Yes, that's correct.
And we're going to do a contract with an outside accounting firm coming in.
Yeah.
Am I missing something here? I mean, it seems like a much bigger problem than just a changeover from one system to another?
So the conversion is not part, I don't think it's any secret that our finance department is a lot of times very, I hate to say overworked, but they don't have a lot of free time. With the new conversion, that HR capital piece, that's created a lot of additional work for our HR or for our finance office. The financial software has created a lot of additional work for our finance office. Plus the tax conversion that was completed maybe a year ago has put new things into place. So our finance office is very busy. When they run into these problems, they have to stop what they're currently doing and fix one of these problems, fix one of these issues, which may take an hour, or it may take 3 or 4 days, depending on the complexity of the issue. So these are all great questions. You're asking great questions. But I think unless you're involved in the minutia of the conversion, and there's only 3 or 4 people that are involved in that deeply in the conversion, I think it's hard to understand why this is needed. But I'm here today telling you that we need to do this. I'm asking for the board's approval. I would like to be able to tell you $30,000 will do it. I cannot promise you that. So.
Something else that I haven't heard mentioned, and I was hoping to hear further discussion on, the overpayment for the last, 10 years to the EMS department employees. Is that going to be a situation that will be rectified by this accounting firm coming in as well, and find out how? I know I've heard behind the scenes discussion about how that took place, but it went on for so many years, and it was only brought to the attention here by payroll changeover.
Yes,
that sounds like we have more of a problem here in the finance department than what meets the eye.
So I'm happy to discuss with the board how and why that error occurred. Because of the complex schedule that EMS runs. EMS implemented 10 years ago scheduling software. The scheduling software also allowed them to print off timesheets when they needed timesheets. So they did not do timesheets like the rest of the county. When EMS implemented that software 2 or 3 EMS directors ago, the EMS director and the payroll coordinator at that time, it's my understanding, here again, I wasn't here, it's my understanding, they set up the parameters within that software of how things should work. This overpayment with EMS was set up in that software. It wasn't a calculation that was done by our finance department. It was set up in the EMS services or EMS software that schedules their daily schedules. So there's no way that our finance department would have caught this, and it's here again, getting way down in the weeds of how EMS is paid. But what it was not doing was cutting off the overtime in the middle of the shift, where one work week ends and one work week begins, another work week begins. So it was paying one shift, 7 hours of overtime, And it wasn't the same shift every time because of the way their schedules rotated. But it was paying one shift, 7 hours of overtime a month. Having said that, it wasn't a full time and a half they were getting paid. We would have had to pay that regular straight time, regardless of whether we paid the time and a half or not, because they were there working. We would have paid their regular rate of pay. So really, it's only the halftime that was paid incorrectly. So in one month, I think between 4 and 6 individuals would receive 7 hours of halftime inadvertently. 7 hours of halftime is about $49. So $49 a month. So per pay period for one shift. So with an operation like EMS, who those employees were overtime, several different types of overtime. They work scheduled overtime that's built into their schedule. And then they work what we would call regular overtime, where they fill in for another employee, or they come in on a day that they were scheduled off. And they do that regularly to fill the seats on an ambulance. They'll stay over if they're running a call to Greensboro or to Durham. And, you know, they just don't quit at 8 o'clock in the morning when they're shifting. They have to return the ambulance and finish out that call. So they have all different types of overtime on a fairly regular basis. So even to think that an EMS employee would have noticed this, extra $49 in their check or error $49 in their check, they're really not going to do that because there's $49 and then you take out FICA and everything else that the county takes out, and you're really probably talking about $25, $30 at the end of the day. So that's the overpayment with EMS. Did that answer your question?
Yes and no. Are any other departments on a situation where we're going to find out that they have their pay schedule messed up as well, or just uniquely capped in the EMS department?
No, I personally believe this is simply in the EMS department. We've made it through the conversion. We're on the new system now, live, and we've not found any additional errors like that I'm aware of. So I think EMS was the only department like that.
As a financial audit, has it uncovered anything like this, or did it not?
Now, the financial audits that the county goes through on a yearly basis, they're not designed to pick up things like this. That's not the rule. So the auditors would not necessarily find something like this. It's possible they could stumble across it, but that's not what these type of audits are designed to do.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Going back to the financial services contract, is there any more questions on that? If not, we need to take action on it. Mr. Hall?
Mr. Chairman, County Manager, so am I to understand that what's before us today is a contract not to exceed $30?
That's correct.
Okay, so, Mr. Chairman, let me back up and ask this way. Do we have this in our budget?
Yes. Well, this is not included as a line item in your budget. What I'm saying is I believe we will be able to do this without the board appropriating additional funds. to the budget. So I think we can take care of it within the current budget.
Okay, so does that mean that since it exceeds a certain amount, we can talk about it, even approve it, but it has to be on the table to the next meeting? Maybe Mr. Owen could help.
Maybe this is a question for Brian Farrell.
Mr. Farrell,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Hall had a question.
Yeah, and I want to make sure I understood the question. It was about approving next meeting. Is that right?
Yes, if we are to take action on this request for 30,000, not to exceed 30,000, and it's not a budgeted line item, and I think we have a threshold of what we can approve that's not budgeted, does that mean it has to be on the table to the next meeting?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, so in your rules of procedure, you've got a provision about taking action on unbudgeted expenses in excess of, I believe it's $5,000. And I believe it requires a unanimous vote. Let me just pull your rules of procedure real quick and I'll take a look at that piece.
Right, the only other additional piece of information that I think is important is that we believe we'll be able to do this within our current budget. It's just not a line item within the budget.
Okay, so that changes it. So if it's not an extra budgeted expense, it's within your budget. The money is within your budget. You're not, budgeting new funds to pay for it. We'll see if that rule that you mentioned, Mr. Hall, speaks to that. And just bear with me. And actually, in the rules of procedure that you approved, that rule exists. So I'm just going to get to it. Okay, so your rule number 27 says no votes on expenditures for off-budget spending in excess of $10,000 shall be held unless tabled from a prior meeting. So the question is this an off-budget spending in excess of $10,000? We don't have a lot of definition about what off-budget spending is. What I hear the manager say is this money is included in the budget, just not for this particular line item. Is that accurate, Mr. Manager?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so it's not new money in the way that, you would consider a new expenditure. So depending on the way you want to define off budget, because money is actually in the budget, I think you could do it if you so choose. Of course, you can also hold it till the next meeting if you'd like some additional time to consider it. And I don't know what the timing of the work is, Mr. Manager, if there's any issues with the delay there.
I would like to see this move forward as quickly as possible, just because when we're held up from being able to move our systems forward until we're able to get this held. So.
Mr. Chairman, I guess a couple comments. Well, our general counsel comments, I don't have a problem with us moving forward. The other comment is that as a retired accountant, I worked in situations on 2 different occasions where we had to put in new systems, huge systems. And I was here when we started this process. I don't know if I expressed some concern, I may or may not have, I can't remember. But I do understand that putting in new systems require, number one, additional staff, And number two, a lot of training. And I don't know if we provided that training, and I know we have provided additional staff. So it's one of those things you either pay up front or pay in the end, but you have to have it.
Any more discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I move for approval.
We have a motion and a second to approve the financial services contract. We'll do roll call voting.
And Mr. Chair, just to be clear, that includes the final county attorney approval to include the standard terms, correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
always.
Right. Thank you.
Mr. Dixon,
No.
Mr. Howard,
Aye.
Mr. Jeffries, Mr. Owen, Mr. Hochstrasser.
Aye.
Aye, for myself, motion carries. County managers updates, Mr. Miller.
Commissioners, I have one quick update and one fairly lengthy update with a question at the end. So my first update is I know everybody has been interested in CoSquare and interested in how the venture is moving forward, but I'm happy to tell you that at this point, CoSquare has reached a break-even point, meaning that the income from the space is now equal to or exceeds our operational expenses. So I think that's a wonderful thing for us moving forward. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about that. If hearing none, my second update is some information that I received from the health director. And I just wanted to share this as a prelude to my question. Once again, we are seeing an increase in viral transmissions. It is estimated that most of what we're currently seeing now in North Carolina is the Omicron variant. Omicron variant behaves differently than previous variants have. Therefore, the CDC has issued updated isolation and quarantine guidance, and the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services has adopted new changes. I think the key points are if an individual is eligible for a booster and has not received it, they are no longer considered to be fully vaccinated. If it's been at least 6 months since their second dose of Pfizer or Moderna, or at least 2 months since their dose of J&J, they are eligible for a booster. And this comes into play for county government when determining isolation and quarantine for exposed individuals. Also, having COVID within the last 90 days is no longer a factor in isolation and quarantine procedures. Whereas before it was, if you'd had COVID within the last 90 days, you were considered vaccinated to some degree. The third point of interest is the shorter isolation and quarantine periods depend heavily on proper masking and masking procedures. So if you have symptoms, regardless of vaccination status, get tested and isolate from others while you wait for a result. If you are not able to be tested, follow the guidance that we're about to speak about. If you're exposed to someone with COVID-19 and are not vaccinated, stay away from others for 5 days, get tested on day 5 after the exposure. And if you test negative, return to normal activities while wearing a mask for an additional 5 days. If you are vaccinated and eligible for a booster, but not yet have been boosted, stay away from others for 5 days, get tested on day 5 after the exposure. And if you test negative, return to normal activities while wearing a mask for an additional 5 days. If you're vaccinated and have received your booster, or you're not eligible for a booster yet, you do not need to stay away from others, but you should wear a mask for 10 days. If you test positive, regardless of your vaccination status, and do not have symptoms, isolate yourself from others for 5 days, then wear a mask for 5 additional days when you return to normal activities. If you have symptoms, isolate yourself from others until you are fever-free and your symptoms are improved. You should isolate for at least 5 days since your symptoms began. Once you stop isolating, you should wear a mask for 5 additional days. Also, so that kind of covers the new guidance for the cities. Along those same lines, I want you to know that the new emergency temporary standard issued by OSHA has been upheld in the courts. This means that at some point after NCOSH delivers their edict, we will have to comply with the vaccination or weekly testing policy. Currently, the county has about 80 employees, or 32%, that remain unvaccinated. The cost for testing each unvaccinated employee per year will be somewhere between $2,840 and $4,258 per employee. That totals somewhere around $340,000 a year that we're going to pay or could potentially have to pay for the unvaccinated employees, simply for the testing. And when I mean testing, I mean the time away from work, not the test kits, because that's offered right now, that's offered free. It may not be in the future, but right now that's free. So taking this $340,000 a year into consideration, I'm just going to ask the board one more time, if the board wants to consider any kind of incentive to make sure employees become vaccinated, or to incentivize employees to become vaccinated.
Mr. Miller, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Currently, isn't the policy under review by the Supreme Court? They've appealed to that level that they are going to hear this case on the Biden vaccine mandate. This thing has become so politicized, so hammered back and forth it's mind-boggling. But if someone has had the virus, their natural immunity, in my opinion, and the opinion of many other healthcare professionals, they're far better off than the people that have been vaccinated with spike protein. But why are we not talking about those issues in public? We all know, because it's so political. But in the end, the court has it in their court now, and they will make a determination as to whether or not that is actually going to be law of the land. So do we need to be concerned about acting on it until we get a final ruling from the Supreme Court?
Well, what I can tell you is, and this is to the best of my understanding, I know Fredo Bluestein with the UNC School of Government wrote a great blog post on it. So anybody that wants to read that, I would encourage them to go read the blog post. But the latest court ruling approved the vaccination or weekly testing mandate to move forward.
So there was no stay put on the execution of it until the higher court rules?
Not to my knowledge. That doesn't mean there may have not been another appeal that I'm not aware of. But updating the board with the information that I know about. And this blog post, This blog post was published on 12/20, so 15 days ago, something like that. So the way that works is OSHA has made their determination, federal OSHA. So with the agreement with North Carolina, now North Carolina OSH has to make their ruling or determination of how they will enforce this or how they will abide by the federal OSHA ruling. And then that comes down to us, and that's when we have to comply.
All right, let's do a Google search, and the Supreme Court has it. It is dated January 2nd. The Supreme Court will hear challenges to the Biden administration federal vaccine mandate. So yeah, it is actually subject to be overruled, or they may uphold it, but it is in legal limbo at this time.
Okay. The information I have says OSHA is, North Carolina OSHA is now going through their steps to make a determination. When they get to that point, we're going to have to be ready regardless of one way or the other what we do. If they say February 10th that we have to move in, that's when we have to make sure we're following these guidelines. Brian, I saw you came up, you had something like that.
You know, I think you're both right. This area of the law is in flux. And so what the School of Government post was reacting to, I believe, Brian, and what you were referencing was that on December 17th, 2021, the Federal Appeals Court lifted the block that existed on the implementation of the vaccination requirements, testing requirements. And so that was, because that block was lifted in late December, the process then moved forward. And what I believe Commissioner Dickerson was referencing was that a new block appears to have gone in place pending the resolution of the federal Supreme Court review of the mandate. So, but what I understood the manager was asking is whether or not the county was really interested at this time in looking at some incentives to potentially encourage the unvaccinated to get vaccinated, which of course is somewhat independent, although admittedly related to the ultimate testing requirement that could cost the dollars that the manager referenced. So, you know, I don't think we're at the end of the case yet. And, you know, all we can do is stay tuned, but, you know, some governments are deciding to offer incentives sort of in lieu of, or in addition to whatever the final resolution of the mandate is at the federal level. I don't know if that's helpful, but I think you're both right.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I appreciate that. So I wasn't aware of the information you were talking about. Having said that, the question still remains: if the board wants to do some incentive, if the board wants to hold off until you find more information about the existing court battle. It's just going to be very expensive for us per employee, per unvaccinated employee, if this legislation comes through.
Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that I think you already have some options that you have presented to us before, correct?
Yes.
So I would say, you know, let our county manager staff prepare some options, but until it's necessary, I don't think we need to do anything with it, to be honest. I don't think we need to consider it until it's necessary.
I agree.
Well, Mr. Chairman and fellow commissioners, if we wait till it's necessary, then we're always reacting. When you're always reacting behind the eight ball. So I think that think we should make some kind of decision. Number one, I would not approve, incentives for anybody to take a free shot. So I think one action is that all employees be informed that pending all of the court cases and everything else, if you don't take a shot, you probably won't be employed with Castle County. I mean, why would you offer incentives to someone, 30% of our employees, when 70% are taking the shot for free? And it's not in, well, it's in our best interest economically, as the county manager explained, but it's in the best interest of all the citizens and the employees that everybody get vaccinated. There are all kinds of opinions out here about what people can and cannot do, what they should and should not do, and who is a middle, who's not. But if you listen to the medical doctor, there's a higher percentage of medical doctors saying take the vaccination than not. There's a higher percentage of medical doctors saying having had COVID does not make you immune. Does not. I mean, that's just a fact. So I don't think at this point we should risk having to pay money for those people that get employed, and I don't think that we should be paying people to take a shot. If they want to work for Castle, you can let them know. If the board makes this decision, the chances are you won't be working for Castle if you're not vaccinated. It's too dangerous for other employees. It's too dangerous for the citizens of Castle County. We don't need our employees trying to serve the citizens unvaccinated.
Any more questions?
Yes.
Anyway, Commissioner Hall, I put that a motion that everybody kind of must be vaccinated and dropped out. I mean, we don't need to wait till the epidemic break out and it's already out. Everybody knows how. So why don't we want to stop it in the blood right now? And everybody working for Castle County and Castle County control taking the shot. I'm that way. I'm not going to vote to put it off. I'll vote to put it in. I've got, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, just to be clear, as I'm, want to give you the best information that I've got here. And what I'm saying is that federal appeals court that lifted the block, if you will, I believe that stands. I don't believe the federal court instituted a new block, at least not that I can find really quickly, but the Supreme Court is going to take the issue up, and there's hearings scheduled for January 7th in the Supreme Court, which is a really expedited review. So, again, it's in flux. The Supreme Court is going to weigh in. I can't tell you that there's a firm block right now on the OSHA rules, but what I can tell you is the Supreme Court is going to take it up and hear arguments and ultimately make a decision on the case, and those oral arguments are set for the 7th of January. So there's more, there's more to be done at the federal level on the mandate.
So, I personally have a hard time at this point telling somebody they got to take the shot. I understand how much money we're talking about that we would have to spend. I am suggesting that even though we wait until we hear what the Supreme Court has to say, and then we will know at that point, if we don't mandate taking the shot, is it going to cost us what kind of federal money if we don't do this, if we don't participate in the program at that point? So my recommendation, if they're going to hear this again, January 7th, I believe you said, Mr. Farrell, I think it would pay to wait and see, because I just have a hard time telling somebody they absolutely got to do it unless it is mandated to us to do it, and we're going to end up losing a bunch of federal money. Mr. Hall.
Mr. Chairman, the Supreme Court will probably have stated here this January 7th. However, when they make a ruling, it could be March, April, May, or June. When we discussed this last, we did not have the Omicron variant. We did not know that this new variant was coming. Right now, we are reacting again. This variant is far, far more, I can't think of the word now, but it's easier to spread. A whole lot of people are getting sick, and while they're not being as sick for those that are immunized, those that are not, from reports, 90 to 98% of them that end up in the hospital are the unvaccinated. When the Supreme Court rules, I don't think they're going to say to anybody that we have to, that they're going to require us to require people to take a shot. They probably won't do that. They're probably going to rule that it's okay if we require it. But they're not going to tell everybody, I don't think. Now, they might have been some federal agencies because that's what the president is doing. But when we get hit with another variant and more people are sick, I just think that we should be more proactive about this than reactive. Waiting is easy. It's the easiest thing in the world to do. Being proactive, before you gotta think, you gotta make some decisions, you gotta do some research, and then move forward. And I think we need to be proactive. To tell our employees, you need to be vaccinated. And I go back to the county manager's question again, about incentives. No incentives.
No, I don't agree with you, the incentives at all.
Okay.
But think back, I tried to think back on years and years ago when we were kids. I remember having to take the polio vaccine. We went to the school sites and we all lined up and took the polio vaccine. There was nothing at that point that I know of, because I was a kid, that mandated you had to do it. It was each individual parent's prerogative to have their child done, or their self done, or whomever. And I'm still thinking that that's kind of sort of the way things run. Now, if they mandate it to us to get it done, then I think that creates a different situation. But right now, I can't just force somebody to take it. It needs to be up to them.
Fellas, I want to interject in this. And I'm not trying to overstep your, are you finished, Chairman?
Yeah, go ahead.
First off, Mr. Hall, I don't know where you get the information from. There's a lot of controversy going around with facts and figures, but the Omicron variant is not nearly as dire as the first two variants that came around. As a matter of fact, there are schools of thought out there that if people are exposed to it and catch this, that it will boost herd immunity to the point where it'll be a good thing for our country overall. The next thing I do want to throw out there, as you're talking about forcing county employees to take this vaccine, experimental vaccine, or be fired, you are going down a slippery slope of caving in and giving away the God-given rights of the people in this country to decide issues for themselves of such importance. And I bet you, sir, if we were talking about forced abortions here, people would be coming unglued. But if the federal government can tell you to take a shot at their discretion that you don't want, with all kinds of possible side effects, up to and including death, and you don't have the freedom to reject that, we're going down a slope that we're going to be nothing but a bunch of mindless morons that the federal government controls like a bunch of pawns on a chessboard. And I don't want to see that happen to this great country we live in. So I'm not going to support any kind of effort to tell our county employees that they have to take a shot at losing their job. And that's the way I feel about it, and I'm not going to change my mind.
Well, since you said it that way, we already got the mileage more right. We are required to take shots to send our kids to school. We all took them. I don't care how old you are, I had to take them. And I'm 70-some years old. More than one, more than two, more than three. Now, when I went to college, I had to take some more shots. Mine is more right. So you can call it anything you want to. The fact of the matter is, this is a health problem. And we've got people out there concerned about the general health of the citizens of North Carolina and the citizens of these United States. And that's where we've got to land. We are up here as 7 commissioners to be concerned about the citizens of Campbell County, not about our personal opinions. And that's what requires a little research, a little thinking, and a little thought before we make these decisions. Now, we all entitled to our decision. I'll grant that. But I'm going to argue for vaccination because we've been doing it for quite a while. I know I took my shot probably at 54, probably in 56, somewhere in there. And you can say what you want to, polio was devastating. I had classmates that had polio. But you're right, Mr. McVeigh, it was up to the parents at that time. And those parents who saw other kids in the community with polio understood it was better to take that chance than to let your child suffer from that. And from the time I left elementary school until 1996, I didn't see another person with polio. And I saw that in West Africa.
Find it interesting, you see the research and you threw the mindless moron thing back at me. If you want to compare apples and oranges, we can do that. The vaccines you're talking about from back in the day and the ones that children are taking before they go into school are government-approved vaccines of a different technology. This, what we're talking about, forcing people to shoot their arms, is spike proteins and all kinds of new genetic manipulation of the virus. And God knows what kind of side effects that's going to have on people going down the line. So we can back this back and forth. I'll just drop where it's at right now. I am not for forced vaccination, nor am I for incentives to get a vaccine.
I understand that. You're willing to drop it. I'm willing to drop it. Say one more thing. Today's technology is much, much better than the technology of the 50s.
That was proven vaccination that had been going down the line for so long. Mr. Hall, this is modern technology with this. We have no idea what it will do to people years from now. There's been no long-term research on what the effects of this vaccine is. And for us to sit here and look at our county employees and tell them, you take this experimental vaccine or you don't have a job here anymore, that's just unconscionable in my opinion. I'm done. I'm not going to tire our time up going back and forth on this. I'm not.
Mr. Armstrong.
That's all.
At this point, I'm not on either side because I don't think we have enough information to get on either side. One thing that I think is being overlooked, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not get vaccinated or get fired. The guidelines are get vaccinated or subject yourself to weekly testing. Now, to me, there's an option, and that's the weekly testing, which is free. Now, the other issue here is, and I believe Jennifer has told us this repeatedly, that vaccinations do not reduce your ability to spread the virus. You are just as contagious if you catch it with or without a vaccine. But to me, the $340,000 number, if we don't implement vaccination, is moot. If people come down with it, test positive, with or without vaccine, they're going to be out of work, and we're going to have to pay the time off. You're saying?
So currently, there's only two two departments within the county that we pay for COVID time, and that was because of OSHA ETS emergency temporary standard, and that's the health department and EMS. All other departments, if they're sick and diagnosed with COVID, they take their leave time to do that. So, and that's changed. You were right how we had operated previously, but currently that's changed. So there is no more COVID time. The time that I was talking about that amounts to $340,000 a year was the time that it takes employees to get tested. We have to pay them for that time. That will amount to somewhere around $340,000 or between $2,800 and $4,700 per employee. So
whether or not they're vaccinated, if they test positive, I mean, if they feel like they've been exposed, they need to go get tested.
that's correct.
So that's where I'm coming from. This is, we keep forgetting the testing aspect of this. Getting tested once a week, how long could that possibly take? 20 minutes? An hour?
Some days. I personally went and got tested last Thursday. I was the first car in the parking lot at 7:45 in the morning. I left a little bit after 9. So an hour and 15 minutes, but that's with the testing side operating as it is now. You throw up an additional 80 people, the employees that we have, into that mix. And it could take 2 hours to get tested. So, and that 2 hours of time is the time that amounts to the $340,000 a year.
As I said, it's not a matter of employment versus vaccination. It's vaccination versus testing. And let's not overlook that when we think about this. And vaccination does not grant you immunity. So we just need a better analysis of this issue than we've been provided before we make a decision.
So, anybody else got anything to say on that? Mr. Hall?
One final comment, I think, that's different from what we've been discussing. And that's the issue of county providing medical insurance. I suspect that in the near future, our medical insurance is going to go up because of this COVID. Whether it happens during the year or we get hit with it in June when we start the new budget. Right now, if I recall, we're spending around $2 million a year in health insurance. Is that correct? $2 million. Now, a 30% increase would be a huge jump. But as long as the federal government is covering some of these costs, we won't see an increase. But I really suspect that when the insurance companies start getting hit, and they will in the next 6 months, that insurance is going to go up. And so that's another thing we need to consider. It's hard on this county now, paying $2 million a year for health insurance. And if that go up to 2.25 or $2.5 million, we talking about another tax increase. And we're talking about it, because of some employees' personal preference. And it's not gonna be employees of Cass County, so I'm not gonna suggest that. It's gonna be all the employees all over the country, because that's the way the health insurance is done, or at least by the state and the region. So we need to consider what we're going to do in 6 months if we get hit with an increase. And I would be willing to bet that we will get hit.
Thank you, sir. Any more comments on this? Mr. Miller, I would ask, since Ms. Eastwood is basically in charge of the pandemic stuff, that maybe we talk with her before we make a decision on this and get her perspective on mandating the employees to get their jobs. Maybe she can provide some different information, as Commissioner Ostriker says, for us than what we've got.
I'm happy to ask Jennifer to be in our next meeting.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I just want to make it clear, vaccination mandate was not at all what I intended when going into this discussion. I see, unvaccinated employees potentially receiving a $2,800 to $4,700 incentive, or not necessarily incentive, but benefit, time off away from work to get tested. And I wanted to urge the board to provide an incentive for unvaccinated or for vaccination. So that was my intent. And I've heard last week what the board said, but it was not my intent to get back into the discussion about a vaccine mandate. So, but I'll be happy to have her here at the next meeting.
All right, thank you. Moving on, Commissioner comments. We have any?
I have one,
Mr. Jeffries.
just to the county manager. Down on Jack Pond Road, we've gone on 3 months along, there's nothing to do, they put most stuff out there. I had several guys come to the high school, when you going to do something? I said, we working. He wanted to know, how you working on it, still putting stuff out there, blocking the road, now what we gonna do about it?
Well, as I've explained, we have to work through the process. So we have to send them letters, and truth be told, we can't make them do anything. We can ask them to remove the trash and the junk, and whatever's in the yard, and then we can fine them. I don't know what stage we're at. I don't know what stage the county planner is at right now. But I do know he has taken action. He has did the research. He has, I believe he's even issued the letters. So we may be at the stage where we begin to find those residents now. But I'll find out and let you know.
So would you come down and just take a look?
Say that.
Would you just come down and take a look? I don't know what plan road goes down or not, but somebody need to do something.
Yes, and that Jack Warner Road, Paradise Drive, is that correct?
On 119, Harold Thomas had the same thing, and they came up with, and the next week, he had to go clean his up and go out of bed, couldn't say anything. This is down on Jack Pond Road, kind of, thinking very hard, something need to be done, I want something to be done.
Yes, sir.
Just in a different section, that's the only thing I'm seeing, and they clamped this man thing up in a weekend block. This man's still down there doing what he wants. Nobody tests him.
Yes, sir.
And the next thing I saw this morning, one of the buses, I think it's a kind of a dangerous thing to have a bus out there on the street now running. One of the vans with the weather like it is.
One of the cash transportation vans.
Well, he was down there past my house this morning, you know, with a bus, and there was ice on the road, I think.
Yeah, I know they got called out this morning, some, potentially dangerous situations. The CATS director took immediate action, pulled the drivers back in, and, did what she needed to do, except for those people that had serious medical appointments that they had to be at, like dialysis and things like that.
That's all right.
Any more comments?
Yes, I just want to make note that I'm all about involvement from folks in the county in that process. I'd love to hear people come over here and speak, give us their input. And, you know, it's pouring down snow today. It's not the most ideal situation for any of us to be here in, but I want to recognize Mr. Yarborough, County Commissioner candidate, for coming out today and being part of the process and showing that much effort to be here and be with us. I appreciate it, sir.
Mr. Howard?
Yes, I have two comments. Number one, I was glad to hear that Coast Square is at break even, because, you know, either sometime above the surface or below the surface, there's a lot of grumbling about us doing that project on County Square, on Coast Square. And I thought then, I think now is a great project. And to know that it's even at break even, it's even better. The other comment is I heard during the holidays that the Board of Elections returned either some CARES Act or some AARP money, I can't keep it straight in my head, back to the state. I think we need to have a sit down with the Board of Elections. I just don't understand how county and our economic condition can afford to be sending money back that was granted to us for any certain purpose, and certainly not for COVID. And I think this was COVID money. There's a lot of needs, I believe, in the Board of Elections. And so we need to talk with the Board of Elections board and find out why they could not spend those dollars.
Mr. Miller, if you would set us up an appointment and have the election board come to us to explain this.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any more commissioner comments? If not, I'm going to move on to announcements and upcoming events. January the 17th, 2022, Martin Luther King Jr. Day here in the county. And January the 18th of 2022, Board of Commissioners meeting at 6:30. And we also have our work planning session scheduled for the 28th of January. If there's no other information we need, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Need a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. We'll do roll call voting. Mr. Dickinson? Mr. Howard? Mr. Jeffries? Mr. Owen? Mr. Ostrager? Mr. McVeigh? We're now adjourned. Thank you, gentlemen.